Welcome back to the Warbird Mistress. Today is Wednesday the 3rd of June 1942, and this is a walk through the war. We have an exciting episode today since we get to cover both the Aleutians and the Battle of Midway, so let's get started. Beginning with the 11th Air Force in Alaska, Japanese carrier-based bombers and fighters of Vice Marshal Boshiro Hosogaya's Northern Task Force bomb and strafe Fort Mears and Dutch Harbor in several waves of Kates and Zeeks. They inflict little damage but do kill 52 U.S. personnel. They flew off the Hio-class carrier Junyo and the light carrier Ryujo. After half the Japanese aircraft get lost in the heavy Alaskan fog, and those who do make it to Dutch Harbor are caught off guard by a prepared American force, they release their ordnance, make a single strafing run, and then turn tail. P-40s from Cold Bay trying to intercept them arrive 10 minutes after the last attack wave departs. Other P-40s at Umnak are notified too late due to communication failures. 9 P-40s and 6 B-26s fly a patrol, but cannot find the fleet 180 miles south of Dutch Harbor, but 2 of the P-40s do engage 4 of the carrier-based aircraft, shooting down 1 and damaging another. In the zone of the interior, a little administrative duty as the 47th Bombardment Squadron Medium of the 41st Medium Bomb Group moves from Visalia Army Airfield to Hammerfield, 50 miles northwest in Fresno, as they continue to fly their Mitchells on anti-sub patrols. In the CBI with the 10th Air Force, a half dozen Mitchells on the other side of the world from the 11th Bombardment Squadron, 7th Bombardment Group, Heavy, earmarked for China, take off from Dinjan, India, and they first fly south to bomb Lashio, Burma, before crossing the Shan Hills into Yunnan en route to Kunming with Japanese Army interceptors not far behind. Though lower than crossing in the high Himalayas, 9 of the Mitchells crash into an overcast hidden mountain at 10,000 feet, and another is abandoned when it runs out of fuel near Chanyi in China. The remaining 2 B-25s reach Kunming, one with its radio operator killed by a fighter's lucky shot. It is worth noting that this is likely one of the Japanese Army's first hints that their 7.7mm guns are nearly impotent against American bombers, as had this been Navy Zeeks intercepting the B-25s, the casualties would likely be as much greater, thanks to her twin 20mm cannon and greater speed, compared to the slower and underarmed Army Air Force fighters. In the Southwest Pacific area with the 5th Air Force, B-17s hit the wharf, warehouse area, and the military camp at Rabaul in New Britain, while further north in the 7th Air Force in the Pacific Ocean area, preliminary action begins in the Battle of Midway. As the Navy and Marines switch into high gear, the Army Air Forces do their bit to take the fight to the Japanese. Only a day after a half dozen had just returned to Oahu, 7 B-17s turn around and depart Oahu for Midway as the battle begins. Meanwhile, 9 of the B-17s on the atoll fly out of Midway Island and attack what they believe to be a group of 5 large warships 570 miles off of Midway. They claim 5 hits and several near misses, although in reality this is Tanaka's transport group, and none of the high-altitude fortress's bombs hit their targets. And as the furball gets tighter, we move to Thursday, the 4th of June, 1942. Beginning again in Alaska with the 11th Air Force, the carrier-borne forces strike again as 11 bombers, 10 fighters, and 8 torpedo bombers attack Dutch Harbor in several waves. 2 P-40s intercept 4 bombers just before noon over Umnak Pass and shoot down 3. The Japanese, now expecting the Americans to fight back, leave oil tanks ablaze and damage both a hospital and a barrack ship in the harbor, as Kates and Vels unleash their deadly loads. An attempt to strike at the Japanese carriers fails due to poor weather, which prevents them from reaching the target, even though patrol aircraft had spotted and maintained contact with the Japanese task force. In the afternoon hours, P-40s intercept 9 fighters, and a dogfight claims 1 enemy aircraft and 1 P-40, the 11th Air Force's first combat casualty. Flak claims another Japanese bomber, and during the afternoon, 2 flying fortresses and 5 marauders attack the carrier force, with 3 more B-26s striking the cruiser Takao. No hits are scored, and 1 B-17 and a single B-26 do not return. The 36th Bombardment Squadron Heavy of the 28th Composite Group, which is based at Fort Greely on Kodiak with B-17Es and LB-30 Liberators, also send detachments to operate from various bases in the Aleutian Islands, as they fear a greater Japanese attack. Crossing the ocean to the China-Burma India Theater with the 10th Air Force, 2 heavy bombers bomb Rangoon, but are attacked by 10 Japanese Army Air Force fighters. 1 heavy bomber is shot down and the other badly damaged. This final raid ends 2 months of harassing strikes against Rangoon as the monsoon season arrives, grounding all air activity for the B-17s. And back out to Midway. Having sighted the carriers, the 7th Air Force does its part as 4 B-26s, in conjunction with U.S. Navy torpedo bombers, attack the Japanese carrier force. 2 of the marauders are shot down and a third is written off after taking over 500 rounds. This latter one is the Susie Q of Lieutenant James Murray, who had famously flown her right over the length of Akagi's flight deck in his escape following his torpedo run. In further morning action, 14 B-17s attack a task force approaching Midway at a distance of 145 miles. They erroneously claimed several hits on carriers and 2 Zeeks shot down. In the late afternoon, 2 B-17s attack a carrier force, claiming hits on a battleship and a carrier and 9 aircraft shot down. 4 other B-17s claim a hit on a heavy cruiser 185 miles off Midway. 6 B-17s en route to Midway from Hawaii bomb ships 175 miles off the atoll, claiming hits on a burning carrier, the Hiryu, hit earlier in the battle, and a destroyer which they claim to have sunk. None of the B-17's claims are true, unfortunately, and all their bombs missed. What they did provide, however, were high-quality photographs of the targets which came to be of great use to intelligence officers. This proved yet again that the best role for the heavy bomber at sea is to be that of a long-range reconnaissance platform, rather than a patrol bomber or anti-shipping platform. And as things continue to heat up in the Pacific, we go to Friday, the 5th of June, 1942. In the American Theater of Operations with Alaska and the 11th Air Force, 18 B-26s, 10 B-17s, and 2 LB-30s take off in search and attack missions against the carrier force, the B-26s splitting into 3 missions, the B-17s into 2. No contact with the Japanese fleet is made, although using radar, the B-17s do bomb targets which look like ships, but later turn out to be the Pribilof Islands. In the zone of the interior, the aircraft and pilots of the 1st Fighter Group at Dow Field, Bangor, Maine, originally slated for movement to the UK, now fly to Mars Field in Charlotte, North Carolina, en route to the West Coast for defense against attack from that front. Still in the Atlantic with the European Theater of Operations and the 8th Air Force, 8 Air Force Base Command, activated in the United States back in January, is redesignated 8 Air Force Services Command. Commanding is Colonel Harold A. McGuinness. In the Southwest Pacific area with the 5th Air Force out of Australia, B-17s hit wharves, a warehouse, and a coal jetty at Rabaul, New Britain Island, as they continued to try to deny the Japanese this valuable asset. And further to the northeast in the Pacific Ocean area with the 7th Air Force at Midway, as the Japanese fleet retires from the battle, the airstrikes continue. At 0430 hours, 12 B-17s follow the Navy patrol planes into the air on patrol bomber duty as Flight 92. Flying on a westward course, they are ordered by radio to attack 2 battleships spotted at 130 miles from Midway bearing 270. At 0615, these B-17s reported their failures to find the target. They were told to return to Kourei and await further orders. As more contact reports came in, the B-17s finally located the 2 ships at about 0830. However, they'd already been bombed by the Dauntlesses and Vindicators of Marine Air Group 22, and no hits were scored. Returning to Midway to refuel and rearm, Flight 92 took off with 7 B-17s at 1305 hours. Their objective was the 2 carriers reported to the northwest, distance 400 miles from Midway. As they flew northward, visibility diminished and the enemy force was not found. The last strike flight of B-17s of the day from Midway was made by 5 B-17s of Flight 93, commanded by Captain Donald Ridings. They take off at 1545 hours. Again, their objective is the enemy carriers to the northwest. By this time, clouds had gathered in the north and the heavy overcast at 12,000 feet, and Flight 93 had no better fortune than Flight 92 in finding their target. In reality, the Japanese had received the order to retreat, and only the screening and bombardment task forces remained in the immediate area. On Flight 92's return leg, contact was made at 1815 hours with a large cruiser on a northerly course. The first element of 4 planes came in at 16,000 feet on a course of 85 degrees, dropping their bombs off the ship's port bow. The second element of 3 planes attacked from the east on the ship's starboard beam. 1 plane's bombs would not release. Of the 16 that were dropped, 1 is reported to have hit the target and 1 was a near hit. Anti-aircraft fire was light and had no damage at that altitude, just like the B-17s, as their reports of hits and near hits were all erroneous. The only contact was a cruiser, which they found at bearing 325 about 425 miles from Midway, and which they attacked at 1825 hours. The ship maneuvered violently and threw up heavy anti-aircraft fire, although still ineffective as the aircraft approached at 11,000 feet. 32 bombs were dropped with 2 near hits, but no direct hits were seen. On the second run over the target, Captain Robert S. Porter's plane managed to not only drop his bombs, but the bomb bay gasoline tank as well. This forces him to leave formation and head back to Midway. The squadron commander followed him down to render any aid he could, but there was little that could be done about a plane that just dropped their gas tank out of their bomb bay. At about 23:30 hours, Porter radioed he was out of gas and landing, and he was not seen afterward. After sundown and rough weather, the return leg of the journey for all involved was difficult, and the planes became separated in the clouds. They could not find Midway until guided in by radar, and did not land until nearly midnight. During the fighting of the 3rd through 5th of June, 7th Air Force pilots carried out 16 B-17 attacks, totaling 55 sorties, and the single torpedo attack by 4 B-26s. Pilot claims total 22 hits and 10 fighters shot down. A total of 2 B-17s and 2 B-26s were lost, the latter to enemy fire and the former to in-flight incidents. With this, one of the first turning points of the war is completed as the Japanese find themselves 4 carriers and a heavy cruiser lighter, together with hundreds of aircraft and scores of highly trained pilots, as well as their confidence in an easy, quick victory against a country against whom they know they cannot win a prolonged war. And that was Wednesday the 3rd of June, 1942, through Friday the 5th of June, 1942. I thank you for joining, and this was definitely a more exciting episode. I'm sorry it took me some time to get out, but like I said, if this ever grows bigger, then definitely I certainly want to make this a full-time affair and get out as much as I can. And I really do enjoy the comments lately. I'm happy everyone's enjoying themselves on here, and that it's not just about boring facts and dates and all that. I think it's just nice to see everybody engaged, and for that I thank you. And as always, a huge thank you to my Patreon patrons, my channel members, especially the new ones. And, once Patreon gets to 25 people, there's going to be exclusive content on there, so please do consider subscribing. If you want to subscribe on here, it's $1 a month at the minimum. So it all adds up, though. But until next time, this is Claire, and I am the Warbird Mistress. Take care.